All right. Good evening, Chair Watts, board members, Dr. Turner, Dr. Martirano. I am Dan Lubley. I am the Director of Capital Planning and Construction, and with me tonight is Mr. Tim Rogers, our Manager of School Planning. We are here tonight to present the 2023 Feasibility Study. While the school system and board has recently concluded the fiscal year 2024 budget process, the Feasibility Study is the starting point and a resource as we begin the capital planning process for fiscal year 2025. Tonight, Mr. Rogers will discuss the projections and feasibility study process while highlighting the school system's capacity needs within the next 10-year planning period. The feasibility study is a comprehensive review of the 10-year student enrollment projections for the school system. It is an annual planning document that begins each cycle of the capital budget process. It provides a new enrollment projection, proposes adjustments and additions to the capital improvement program and the long-range master plan, considers strategies to address enrollment growth or decline for the school system, and follows guidance of Policy 6010 school attendance areas. The projections presented in this document are informed by updated student enrollment, housing and birth data, and analysis of trends by our Office of School Planning. The projections focus on the kindergarten through 12th grade. While pre-kindergarten is growing with the blueprint for Maryland's future, factors like family choice and lack of trend data limit the ability to project enrollment for this group. The Office of School Planning is continuing to discuss with staff in early childhood. The capital planning process is an 18-month process that starts in January of the first year with the new enrollment projection and ends with the school capacity chart, or Apfo, in early summer of the second year.
Good evening. The enrollment projection is the foundation for the planning and the feasibility study and the capital budget. Development of the annual enrollment projection occurs in the winter and early spring months. We collect data from Hcpss sources as well as state and local agencies, and then use our geographic information system to aggregate the data by school to ensure we gain school-level insights about trends. The data is used to project the September 30th enrollment for the following school year and subsequent years. Our methodology mainly relies on historic cohort survival rates, which look at past student population patterns within the county to construct survival or progression ratios used in projecting a particular grade's progression through the school system. The yellow highlight in this graphic shows a cohort of students moving through the school system starting in year 1 as kindergartners. This particular cohort is exhibiting growth. As you can see, students are joining the cohort each year. We divide the new enrollment by the previous year to get a ratio, and we collect a history of these ratios and apply historical averages to make our projection for future enrollment. In addition to the calculation and application of cohort survival rates, the methodology uses many additional data points in order to project student population, including live birth data, birth projections, permits for newly constructed homes, resale of existing homes, apartment turnover, and enrollment in regional programs. Each data point contributes to the projection using specific appropriate methodologies for each category. Student enrollment for school year 21-22 did not reach expected levels due to ongoing impacts of the pandemic and ensuing economic conditions. Instead of increasing as expected, enrollment decreased slightly. For school year 22-23, we expected an increase of 473 students, but enrollment only increased by around 200 students. We expect enrollment increases to continue in coming years as continuing development and migration fuel population growth in the county. To demonstrate this, we've displayed the 3 decreases and increases of student enrollment over the last 3 enrollment periods. New students, the blue bar, arrive in Hcpss each year and are mainly from new homes, resales, and kindergarten students enrolling for the first time. The exiting group of students in the orange bar includes those graduating, leaving the school system for other options, or students who have moved out of the district. These data points follow a decrease in enrollment of nearly 3% in 2020 due to the pandemic. Adding to the background of enrollment growth in Hcpss, this chart shows the annual net change in K-12 enrollment starting in 2013. Going back to 2010, on average, the school system added over 780 new students per year through 2019. However, in 2017 through 2019, there was a slight decline in the level of growth of new student enrollment. Then in 2020 and 2021, enrollment trends were interrupted by the impacts of the pandemic. Based on updated information used in this year's projection, we expect the previous trend to resume with enrollment increase of around 0.7%. Next, our office reviews and updates our projections each year to incorporate the latest data and trends related to all of the factors that are considered. For this reason, projections vary from year to year. The larger chart above shows the projected countywide enrollment for the years 2023 to 27 as presented in projections developed between 2019 and 2023, the last 5 annual projections. Note that in the older projections, the upper lines on the graph, the expectation was for enrollment to exceed 59,000 students in 2023. Additionally, since 2018, the trend has indicated decreasing rates of enrollment growth when compared to earlier projections, depicted by the flatter lines in the lower portion of the chart. The blue line at the bottom of the chart is the new updated projection. It shows continued enrollment growth over the next 5 years. Due to this growth, there will be a need for additional school capacity at all 3 levels. The projected enrollment for each level is shown for 2023, Year 5, 2027, and Year 10, 2032 in the smaller chart. At each school level, enrollment is projected to continue increasing through the next 5 years, while the elementary and middle school totals begin to decline slightly as we reach Year 10. The overall projected enrollment continues to increase through the 10-year period, but falls well short of the totals expected in previous projections. This projection compares favorably with the updated projection provided by the Maryland Department of Planning, with the countywide enrollment tracking within 1.2% over the next 10 years, and the annual projections for each school level tracking within 4.2%. The countywide K-12 projection for school year 23-24 is 56,536 students. We brought the board a report on the accuracy of the 2022 projection in January. Since this projection is the official, this projection and the official school year 22-23 enrollment are foundational to the projection being presented in this report, we included a brief review of the accuracy of that last projection. Over the past 10 years, the countywide projection error rate has ranged from 0.05% to 0.7%. The 2022 projection was notably more accurate than the previous 2, as many of the effects of the pandemic began to subside. We anticipate a return to pre-pandemic levels of accuracy as post-pandemic enrollment trends become established. Evaluation of the impact of projected school enrollment growth requires accurate representation of school capacities. Capacities are not necessarily fixed to the original capacity when a building first opened. Change in space usage, program location, and building or program specifications can change capacity. We work collaboratively with schools and program leaders to collect updated information on room usage and programmatic changes and expansions. For school year 23-24, as in previous years, the expansion of several special education programs and early childhood programs necessitated recalculation of capacity at some schools. These changes are included in the post-measures charts in the feasibility study in order to compare between the end of school year 22-23 and the beginning of school year 23-24. We'd like to note that these capacities were calculated based on the proposed fiscal 24 operating budget and may be further adjusted as a review of program needs and placement continues. The next few slides summarize the capacity needs and suggested strategies to address those needs based on this updated projection. For school year 2023-24, we're projecting 19 schools at the elementary level to be utilized at or below 100%, and an additional 18 to be utilized between 101 and 110%. 5 elementary schools are projected to be utilized above 110%, and those are Athelton, Bryant Woods, Centennial Lane, Cradle Rock, and Phelps Luck, which is projected to be at 120%. Relocatable classrooms remain a prevalent strategy to address capacity needs. In addition, 2 new elementary schools, one in the southeast and one in the northwest, are recommended, as well as a regional early childhood center at Faulkner Ridge. The prioritized new elementary school in the southeast should provide relief to several schools, including Bowman Bridge, Forest Ridge, Gorman Crossing, Hammond, Hanover Hills, and Laurel Woods. A second new elementary school in the northwest should provide needed relief for Manor Woods, Waverly, and West Friendship, and possibly extend to St. John's Lane and Veterans. Also, we're recommending incorporating regional early childhood seats in both new schools to help meet the requirements of the blueprint legislation. At the middle school level, we're projecting 2 schools to be utilized above 110%, Mount View Middle and Patuxent Valley, with 16 schools between 90 and 110% utilization. Since the crowding is more geographically distributed at this level, instead of new schools, additions are recommended for schools with crowding concerns or that are in need of renovation. As planning begins for each of these projects, it will be important to maximize the potential for adding capacity. Just like at the elementary level, the area of greatest need is in the southeast, with approximately 350 seats needed to maintain 100% utilization for this region. Additions at Murray Hill and Thomas Viaduct could allow relief at Hammond, Murray Hill, Patuxent Valley, and Thomas Viaduct. With focused boundary adjustments, the addition at Dunlogan Middle School could provide relief to Burley Manor, Mount View, and Patapsco. Additional relief for these schools comes from an addition renovation at Patapsco Middle School later in the timeline. Until these projects can be completed, the need for relocatable classrooms will be reviewed annually, with additional units placed as needed. At the high school level, boundary adjustments adopted in 2019 and 2022, along with the addition to Hammond High School and the opening of Guilford Park High School, provide relief to the most crowded schools. One high school is projected to be over 110% utilization for school year 22-23, Reservoir, which is projected to be at 111%. After the phase-in is complete and Guilford Park is operating with all 4 grades, it is expected all high schools will be under 110% utilization. Looking forward, a recommended addition at Centennial could provide relief for Marriott's Ridge, coupled with needed renovations for Centennial High School. This strategy includes focused and effective boundary reviews to achieve improved capacity utilization. The planned addition to Oakland Mills High School could provide capacity to balance utilization among Eastern high schools in the future. In the interim, most of the schools shown on this slide already have relocatable classrooms, and all schools will be reviewed annually for placement of relocatable classrooms. Based on the needs and strategies just noted, the feasibility study presents proposed capacity priorities and potential adjustments to the timing of capacity projects. The FY24 capital budget projects are shown here for reference. The most urgent capacity needs are at the middle school level in the southeast and northern regions, with both projected to exceed 110% in the next 10 years. With effective boundary adjustments, the Dunlogan Middle School project will provide needed relief in the north, but the Murray Hill addition should be prioritized to provide relief in the southeast. The most urgent elementary capacity need is in the southeast, with schools included in the southeast APFO region plus Hanover Hills requiring around 300 seats of capacity to remain under 100% utilization through 2032. This new elementary school should include a significant amount of capacity for full-day pre-K. Beyond those, planning should continue for capacity projects at Thomas Viaduct, Patapsco, Centennial High School, and a future elementary and pre-K project impacting the north and northwest regions. These priorities should be considered along with maintenance and renovation needs during the fiscal 25 budget cycle. And as we consider this updated enrollment projection and the strategies to address capacity concerns, there are a few themes that help frame the feasibility study recommendations. The pandemic disrupted housing, economic, parent choice, and enrollment trends. The effects of this disruption continue as new trends are established. Countywide enrollment is expected to increase through the 10-year planning period, but not at the levels once forecast. Proposed priorities for new capacity reflect the updated projection, but do not take into account maintenance or renovation needs in this document. All facility needs will be considered during the capital budget process. And lastly, there are still many unknowns regarding expectations and funding regarding the space requirements of Blueprint. We will continue tracking this topic and planning for the possibilities.
So in conclusion, the 2023 feasibility study puts forth updates to the suggested capacity strategies, identifies potential boundary reviews associated with new seats in the future, and furthers the discussion on growing needs for regional programs. As we move into the beginning of the FY 2025 capital budget process, it will act as one of the identifiers of capital needs considered in the next capital budget. We are happy to assist with any discussions or answer any questions that board members may have.
Thank you. Ms. Mosley?
For table 2.2, are those already existing programs, or are those new, are the ones that are having more capacity added to them, are they existing programs already with just adjustments for needing more space, or are they more students coming into the school?
Table 2.3
2.2.
on page 10? Mm-hmm. Okay. The table on page 10 shows capacity adjustments related to reevaluating schools where programs are either being moved or expanded. So the numbers shown here are changes to the capacity of those schools.
So some of them might be already changes to existing programs, and some of them might be new programs.
Yes.
Being implemented. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the table 3.2, I gotta scroll down and see what page that is. Hold on a second. It's with the accuracy projections. Yeah, 3.2 on page 35.
Yes.
The actuals, what is the date of that data?
It should be September 30th, 2022.
Is that the same data that is on the school's website for the official enrollment by grade, school and grade, or is it different? Because there's differences.
It should be the same, except for this would not include pre-K. And they're also, depending on the report that you're looking at, for certain schools, we have to pay attention to whether we're including Homewood students at their home school. Some reports exclude them from counting at their home school and list them separately in their own row. And then we also have slight differences for students in the RICA program. And we did find also that the official enrollment report was updated soon after it was provided to the state. So we're off. We may be off by about 6 students total.
Okay.
Based on that updated report that we just found out about.
Yeah, well, I wanted people to know that the pre-K is included in one and not in the other. Because
Correct.
when you look at the elementary schools, it can be a little shocking that there's
Yes.
differences like that. Middle schools, when you look at them, they look pretty consistent. And then high school has some flexibility, maybe like 4 to 15 students per school off.
Okay.
But it's because of those differences there. So I just wanted to, there is this data set available to people. I don't want people to be confused that it's
Right.
everything in it, yeah.
There are a variety of enrollment reports that are posted,
Right.
all with different requirements for counting students in different ways.
Right, so I just wanted to bring that up, because I know that's important to people to know. Thank you.
Dr. Chen?
Yeah, I just try to confirm the slide number 8. That's 2023 grand total, 56,536. Does that including the pre-K?
No, sir, that's just K through 12.
Just K to 12. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Another thing is about the elementary school, new elementary school number 43. I thought we voted for Turf Valley, or this is not settled.
So, yes, the board did vote last year to make elementary school 43 be at Turf Valley. What the feasibility study does is take a look at where the actual data is suggesting. So the feasibility study evaluates that data and provides recommendations. And as I noted, it becomes a document for consideration as we then consider the capital budget. But you are correct that the board did vote for ES 43 to be at Turf Valley.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Yes, sir. Thank you. That's all.
Dr. Wu?
Oh, thank you for the report. My first question is about table 2.2 on page 10. It's about the last two rows. It says the Public School Employees Child Development Program, PSE-CDP, moved from Reservoir High School to Hyman High School. And I saw that for Hyman, the capacity got decreased by 64, and the Reservoir High School, the capacity got increased by 22. Could you clarify why those two numbers don't match each other?
Yeah, so when we received the final the final plans for Hammond High School and noted that this PSECDP program had been relocated, we went ahead and reevaluated the final floor plan and capacity for considering the intended use of each room in the newly renovated Hammond, and determined that the overall capacity following the board's approved formula should be adjusted down by more than just the 22 spaces, 22 seats associated with that. I'm going to mess up the acronym, PSECDP program.
And another factor that goes into that is that at Hammond, there's actually 2 classes that are moving in there versus Reservoir, there's only 1. So the Public School Employee Child Development Program was housed at Cedar Lane, Fulton campus. One of the programs moved over to Reservoir, which is identified here. The other space that will also be going over to Hammond is the one that is at Cedar Lane. So that's not represented in the Reservoir number. So that's another reason that they don't necessarily connect at the same number.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understood correctly. So basically, for the 64 Cs and decrease in Hyman, 22 came from the program moved from Reservoir. And then they also have actual number moved from the Cedar Lane program. And also there's some numbers because of the final building plan assessment.
Yes.
So those 2 factors contribute to the final 64 Cs.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you. And my next question is about, I will need to scroll it down, about table 2.3 on page 11. So it says, the footnote says ISRC update, March 2023, for Iceland High School, the capacity changed from 1543 to 1811. Centennial High School, 1091 to 1530. Glenelg High School, 944 to 1675. So what's the reason why the state number changed so much, especially for Glenelg High School? There's a big increase.
Certainly. So the Glenelg High School specifically was a school that was brought up in past board meetings and prior years. I believe it was Dr. Wu who brought that up and questioned why that was so much lower than other high schools, or the ratio between the local rated capacity and state rated capacity didn't match what other high schools. Typically, when a project is completed, we work with the state to update the state rated capacities. Sometimes for multiple different reasons, that number just doesn't get updated. So when it was brought up, our interagency specialists in our Office of School Construction went through several different high schools, reevaluated them, and actually got with the state to say, these are your more appropriate numbers. So that's where it started from, and she updated that with the state.
Okay. Because when I look at number change, I think the percentage increase is really large. So which means that if the state using this capacity information for their decision making, actually it may not accurately reflect the reality in the local schools. So how was those state capacity number used? Because I understand that for our redistricting, we use the local data. So how was the state capacity number used by the state or by our Howard County?
So just like we use the local rated capacity, the state utilizes their number, the state rated capacity. So when they're evaluating a project and evaluating the demonstrated need for a capacity increase, the state will utilize their number, the state rated capacity. It's also important to note that the way the state creates their number is different than the way that we create our local rated capacity, which is why they don't match up.
Let me rephrase my question. Actually, my question is more about the percentage change, because for Glenelg, you can see it changed from 944 to 1,675. And also Centennial changed from 1091 to 1530. Those changes are really big, which means that when state rely on the state capacity number to make decisions, then there's huge uncertainty associated with the number. Then my follow-up question is, how do we make sure that we communicate with the state so they can update their numbers in a timely manner? Because when I see the big percentage change, I worry that there's huge uncertainty.
Understood. So we have started the process and working with the state to try and make sure that the numbers are updated in a timely manner. An example will be one Guilford Park High School when it's completed, then also Hammond High School. So when the project is actually completed, again, our interagency specialist will go through and do her analysis and then communicate that with the state. Hopefully it will be in a very timely process, and their state-rated capacity will be updated quickly, and we do not have another situation similar to Glenelg. That way, it is updated immediately, and there's not a jump later in the future. As far as the uncertainty, I understand the perspective that is provided with that to see this jump at this point. This jump would have happened if the timeliness would have been there right after that project was completed. With Glenelg specifically, there was a large classroom addition that was done as a project, and that's why that capacity increased so much. So the change from the 944 up to the 1675 was not necessarily an error, but was a change in what the actual capacity of the project was. It just, due to timing and other factors, was not updated at the time of the project and was just recently updated now.
Okay, thank you. So basically, we'll need to communicate with the state early and often to make sure that they can modify the state capacity number in a timely manner so it will reflect the reality, especially when we have a project done at schools.
Yes, ma'am, and other LEAs have been communicating with the state as well. The state has gone through and looked at the elementary schools, and we believe they will be doing the middle school and then high schools as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Mallow?
I'm trying to make sure that I understand what's being said in Table 2.2. I know lots of us are talking about that one tonight. Let's just take Bryant Woods, since it actually already came up earlier tonight during public testimony or public forum. So if we take 72 students' spots, school capacity numbers, out of the total number for Bryant Woods, which I'm seeing is 361, if I look at Table 2.3. So does that mean that as soon as, because this, prior to looking at this 2.2 table, it says, changes are noted below pending approval of the FY24 budget request, which we've already done. So I assume this was produced prior to.
Yes.
So what does that really imply? Does that mean that we take the existing population at Bryant Woods, and now it's, because we're going to use space for 2 ALS classrooms and 1 MINC program, that then they are going to be 130% over capacity?
Right, because of changes to programs at Bryant Woods, we reevaluated the capacity of the entire building using updated room use data from the school. Met with the school staff to confirm that the capacity should be reduced by 72 seats, And that does in fact drop the capacity from, I think you noted 361,
361.
correct, down to 289. And that does mean that with the projected enrollment for school year 23-24 of 337, that Bryant Woods' capacity utilization would be approximately 117%.
Okay. So how do we address that? Like,
Well, we currently have 6 portables there as an interim measure. And then going forward, it'll be evaluated for boundary adjustments or future capacity projects. Potentially, as identified in this study, an adjustment may occur related to the installation of regional early childhood programs at Faulkner Ridge.
but we haven't even broken ground, so so are you suggesting that we redistrict around Bryant Woods at 117% capacity? That seems
Right.
striking, concerning.
I understand, and that's a strategy that we'll be considering going forward.
But it's not a strategy we're considering today.
Not today. It's outlined in this document as something that will be considered going forward as we plan for future years.
Okay. Why is it not the recommendation to pursue it for, so if we look at this, so if we accept the feasibility study, then, and that triggered a redistricting, let's just say it, then it would begin planning for fall of '24, right?
Yes.
So what we're saying is by doing nothing right now and moving programs there, that we are not going to address that school's capacity utilization until 2025 at the earliest.
Well, one way we are addressing it is by having relocatable classrooms there as an interim measure. So they have, with 6 relocatable classrooms that, depending on their use, would add between 120 to 150 seats of capacity. So that'll
But-
be in place, and they're not going to go anywhere for the foreseeable future.
Since there's already 6 there, then we are, first of all, what is the restroom situation for those 6 portables?
They're singles, so they don't have built-in restrooms.
Okay, so anytime we're using that, and they're currently using it, so, and they're a Title I school. So when we look at this confluence of Title I school, overcapacity at 117% immediately, then, but no additional relief, we're just saying that, we're just keeping it the same.
I would also note that, and one thing that we've identified as a theme for this projection is, for this document, is that we're still experiencing some volatility in our enrollment projections. So as we learn what the new trends are coming out of the pandemic. So while we are projecting the school at 117% with a low capacity number, it doesn't take a lot of students to sway that number, that utilization number, one way or the other. We could be off on this projection, is one possibility.
Right.
I wouldn't anticipate that, but it's possible.
But doesn't the state have a mobility tracking, like a mobility tracking indicator for student transition and student mobility?
Student mobility has to do with students coming and going, I think, within the school year.
Yes, so, and have we looked at, like, in a case like this, since we have a specific example where it's going to be overcapacity and there's plans to not address it beyond what we already have, then are we sure, have we looked at the old projections to know whether or not there's a high volatility in this particular school's enrollment, which I do, if I'm not mistaken, I think there is. I think that your projections as a county are phenomenal. And where we have high mobility rates, the projections degrade.
Correct.
And
It's more difficult.
Isn't this a historically
It is.
high degrading
This,
confidence?
correct. This school, with the mobility of their student population and just the characteristics of the communities that attend there, it is a more difficult population to project. And in recent years, we have over-projected this school. I believe each of the last 3 years, we've projected higher than the actual enrollment has come in, again, for K through 5. And so what we've identified as the interim strategy is maintaining the 6 relocatable classrooms that are there. And going forward, as we gain more confidence in the enrollment trends that are presenting themselves as we exit the pandemic, we will plan for additional strategies if the capacity utilizations that are expected from this projection come to fruition. And it's also identified in this document that neighboring schools, especially Swansfield, do have or are projected to have available capacity. So we will be considering boundary adjustments. It doesn't mean we're going to do it, but it means it should be considered going forward.
I have such confidence in your numbers that I'm concerned that the answer is do nothing today. And I guess I'd like to hear that either we don't reduce it by 72 and we put those 72 rec and MINC programs, or 72 slots of rec and MINC programs at a Swansfield, which does have capacity right now. Is that a possibility?
I can't speak for the folks that administer those programs, but we can have a conversation about that.
Well, Dr. Martorano, do you hear what I'm saying?
So good evening, excuse me. Good evening, board members. My name is Bill Barnes, Chief Academic Officer. Good evening, Chair Watts, Dr. Martorano, Dr. Turner-Little. Certainly, Ms. Mallow, we can look at projections. I think immediate relief for next fall, we're past that point because of staffing and programming and things. I think what we would be looking at is moving it as a future strategy, moving programs around. So I guess no in the short term, yes in the long term.
Okay, I will yield the floor. This is concerning that we don't have an immediate strategy, and yet we're planning. I mean, you say that there's not something for next year, but at the same time, we're moving this in for next year. That seems counterintuitive to me, that we would intentionally make this capacity situation worse in this way. So I yield the floor.
Hcpss.
I guess my question, I know you were talking specifically about Bryan Woods Elementary School, but for an example, with Elk Ridge Elementary School, you have the same strategy as far as portables? Because there's no room in that space at Elk Ridge Elementary School for portables.
So Elk Ridge Elementary's capacity utilization situation is a little bit better than Bryant Woods. Bryant Woods, we're projecting, like I mentioned, 117% for next year and staying around that level for a year before it continues to increase. At Elk Ridge, we're projecting 105%, and I don't want to present that that's not a concern because the board's target utilization is 100 to 105. However, Elk Ridge does have existing portables. So it's a little bit different situation than Bryant Woods.
So they're not going to need any additional portables?
At Elk Ridge, like I said, we evaluate every year. We don't have plans to add. They're not getting additional portables this summer, but we'll continue monitoring their projection, monitoring their enrollment as the reports come out each month, and having conversations with the administration there to make sure that if portables become necessary based on projections and school need for next summer, that we're considering that in time to address it.
Okay. And Deep Woods, which is where looks like based on your projections, is in the middle of Bryan Woods and Elk Ridge. So that's the same thing with Deep Wood or Deep Run?
So Deep Run, we're projecting 647 let me make sure, just double check this number. Yeah. So Deep Run, we're projecting 647 students for a capacity utilization around 90% over the next several years before decreasing into the upper 80%. And they do have, I believe, one portable still on site.
Okay. And so is this like special this year that the board gets this report because this reporting really was getting ready to happen? Could we get this sooner, or it's just when your numbers come in?
We deliver this report to the board every year around
At
this
this
time.
time?
Yep, in June.
So you already know that there's a problem, like my fellow board member said. So we're aware there's a problem, and at this point, it's nothing we can do about it, right?
Are you, the Brian Woods
Right,
question?
I'm
Yeah.
using Brian Woods, yes.
Yeah, so we work on enrollment projections over the winter and early spring months. We bring a plan to the board, again, in the early spring months, as soon as we have a preliminary projection number to look at a plan for moving portable classrooms for that summer, buying new portable classrooms if we need them, and that's kind of the first step towards providing interim relief. And we almost always meet with the staff at those schools that we're considering adding portables, just to go over the numbers, to make sure we have accurate information, and to ascertain get their perception of their crowding situation. We did that with Bryant Woods, met with the staff there. And again, the 6 portables are on site, will be fully functional, and will be a supplement to the capacity that's offered by the brick and mortar building. No, it's not not intended to be a long-term solution. However, they'll be there as long as needed, and we'll consider other measures as we update projections and consider strategies each year.
Okay. And you said you met with the staff, and what was their response to this? That they would be okay?
I think it was general level of concern about not having space, the Title I component, needing additional space for those services as well. And just overall concern that it's an older building and has some of the characteristics that a lot of our older, smaller schools have around Columbia. But with, what I remember is a general sense that with the 6 portables on site, it would be satisfactory maybe for this year, with the knowledge that we would be reviewing things and continuing the conversations for future years.
Thank you.
Dr. Chen?
So for the 6 portables, do we know the age, how many years they've been there for the Brianwood?
We do have that information. It's not in part of the feasibility study. I think, is it 2 or 3 of them were placed there within the last 3 years? So there's a few of them that are quite new, and a few that have been there for a few years. I don't know the exact age off the top of my head, but we can provide that.
Okay. So I think the school itself is quite small, but it seems the portable disproportionately large compared to the school itself. Do we have a plan to add addition or a renovation? Because we heard from community, from the forum, we received the email about any plan to upgrade, expanding capacity. Do we evaluate those possibility?
It is always a possibility. As of right now, Bryant Woods is not in the long-range master plan. As noted with the community testimony as well as the feasibility study, it is a component that goes into the consideration for the next capital budget. So it is an item that can be considered as we move into the FY 2025 capital budget, understanding that there is a current long-range master plan which would have to be considered as well. So this would be adding a project to that.
Okay. So the school itself seems to build 68. Do we have any major renovation before?
I could not tell you off the top of my head, but we can absolutely look that up and let you know the last years
Okay.
of renovation for the facility.
Okay, I think if we want to add in this long term, we probably need the information, the
Understood.
history about that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Most of my other questions have been answered already, but I did want to ask about the part that I was looking for in the document again that said like study Title I capacity. It kind of just said like we need to do that, and I was wondering what that means and what does it look like, and when should we expect the results of that study?
I don't think we know exactly what it looks like yet, but what we're learning as we meet with schools and discuss capacity is that schools that have Title I services have additional staff in those buildings that are used as additional classroom teachers or intervention teachers, and they all require additional space. So when we present a school like a Bryant Woods or a Stevens Forest or others that are Title I, that have Title I services, the capacity number that we're presenting doesn't necessarily take into account those additional staff. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but we'd like to study that over the next year or so as we start to look at our capacity methodologies at all levels and come back with some information on that.
Okay, because I will say I think I was at Stevens Forest,
Right.
and I was looking at a reading pullout that was happening on the floor by the jackets.
Right.
So there's definitely, I'm concerned that there's no actual pullout space to further the Title I dollars, right? So we can actually provide them an actual space so they can do the interventions that students need. So yes, I would. What are you thinking for the timeline, at least, of this study?
Well, I think it's something that's on our, something that we'd like to do is update the capacity methodologies at all three levels. The middle school, or the high school capacity methodology was last adopted by the board, I believe, in 2009, and then the middle school methodology in 2012, followed by elementary schools in 2013. Programming in schools has changed significantly since those capacity methodologies. We'd like to review that. And we're discussing at this point whether that's something we have the capacity to do in-house or whether we need to look to consultants to support that process. And it needs to also work in tandem with the ed specs that we're reviewing as well. So I don't have a timeline for you, but it's something that we are viewing as an important step as we move forward.
Okay, I understand it's in its infancy, and I'd love for it to stay in place so it's not lost, that we need additional space for services provided by Title I staff.
Understood.
Thank you. Ms. Mosley.
In relation to that, I also think that when we're talking about the restrooms access per student, it's access per student, not necessarily availability per student, because it's a nuanced conversation, because if there isn't adequate staffing to supervise bathroom access, the students do not have access to that bathroom. So that means there are even less bathrooms per student. So when we're talking about capacity and we're talking about scheduling and we're talking about staffing, we also need to think about what students actually have access to all of the time when it comes to bathrooms in particular. And then also, it was mentioned briefly to have the Title I class sizes are different than non-Title I schools. And that information, as well as what learning spaces are in the building, needs to be accurately reflected in capacity availability and not be flexed to use in different situations, because we need to be honest about what our population is doing with the space. And then one of my original questions was, where in the process of determining what programs are being expanded and placed where does your feasibility study have a play? More specifically, if we're talking about this Bryant Woods adding 72, or taking away the capacity of 72 students from the school by adding space needed for that program, when was that determination made? Because I feel like, especially with these smaller schools enrollment, right, it's not like the optimal size for moving programs as easily. Just a few students changes their capacity utilization significantly, right? When you have a small population. And if we are determining, if your staff is determining where programs are going and where programs are expanding and things like that before the feasibility study comes out, then we don't necessarily understand the actual impacts of that expansion or change. Whereas if it is after, then we can more accurately reflect, oh, well, maybe we do have space to expand that need in that particular school or not. And it could just be that these are the students that are at this school, these are the services that these students need, and that's a different conversation as well. And then maybe we can trigger, you know, boundary adjustments or whatever other changes that need to happen before we can be more proactive with that need rather than reactive, right? Or wondering, or just waiting and seeing what next year will come or the year after. And I realize that student needs change. You know, we don't know who's going to come to the school tomorrow, right, to enroll and what their needs are going to be. But at least we can try our best to understand that flexibility, particularly in those smaller schools. So that's what I wanted to say, to make sure that that conversation happens in a better time, and that's better in making the decisions than looking at it and being like, okay, wait, right? Because we want to make sure that our school enrollment utilizations stay within the policy. We don't want to trigger boundary adjustments in the policy because of a decision we made to expand a program or move a program or whatever. Thanks.
Understood.
Okay. Dr. Chen, is your hand raised from before? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, thank you very much. That concludes the feasibility study report. And Ms. Mallow.
When I'm looking at the cover sheet, it says, proceed with the recommendations presented in this report. Does that mean this is actionable? I mean, it says report at the top, so not action, but the recommended future direction.
There's no action tonight, it's just a report. I think that language is to encourage consideration of these priorities as you go forward with the FY25 budget process.
Okay, because I was also looking in the report for a section labeled recommendations, and while the word recommendations appears 34 times, there are no direct recommendations, like there's no section on recommendations. So, okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I want to maybe add to that, your recommendations are the final-ish slide or whatever that you had. That's your suggestion for moving forward? Those like long range, those 5 options that with the,
Yes.
that's your recommendation?
In terms of strategies to address the projected crowding resulting from, or capacity utilization concerns resulting from this year's projection, that final slide, I don't have numbers in my printout, but the slide that shows the graphic identifying the priorities is basically our recommendation.
Right. The page that says long range planning considerations?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Ms. Bell, is your hand raised again?
It is not.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah.